Hi everybody, I'm Kate Messner. Welcome to our last Marty McGuire Global Read Aloud video Q&A. I can't believe we're almost done here. We got some great questions this week, and we're going to start with Mrs. Grifford's first grade class in Colleyville, Texas. They would like to know why I had Mrs. McGuire insist that Marty be the princess. And also, is it hard for me to try new things like Marty? Well, I had her mom push her into that role because her mom really felt like it would be good for her to try something new, and I think it's always good to try new things. Is it hard for me sometimes, just like it is for Marty? Sometimes. I think it's hard for everybody. Mrs. Johnson's third grade class in Mount Vernon, Washington has a student named Andrew who says, "Have you ever hidden a frog so you could sneak it into someplace?" No, but I kind of want to now. Mrs. Hudson, Mrs. Mole, Ms. Shue all have classes in Mount Vernon, Washington, and they have some questions. Jaden says, if Marty McGuire was a grown-up, what would she do if she had kids? I love that question. I think she would probably take them on lots of hikes and outdoor adventures. Alex says, you changed the title to the next Marty McGuire book. Why? Well, the next one couldn't have the exact same title because how would you be able to tell them apart? So the second Marty McGuire book is called Marty McGuire Digs Worms. Josh says, have you ever kissed a frog and had it turn into a prince? Well, yeah, that's how I met my husband. Not really, I made that up. Max says, how did you figure out what you were going to do? For instance, which parts Marty would be in the play, who her friends would be, which teachers would help her, and other things. A lot of those details I would sketch out in my writer's notebook before I actually wrote them in the book. So I would make, I actually made a list of parts in the play and sort of assigned parts as if I were Mrs. Alloy, and that was kind of fun. Mrs. Doom's grade 2-3 class at Lincoln Alexander School in Hamilton, Ontario says, we would like to know if you participate in any sports or if you like to watch sports. I don't really like to watch sports on TV, but I like to do sports myself, especially running and playing tennis. Trisha Wagner's third graders from Johnson Creek, Wisconsin ask, what character in the Marty McGuire book do you most identify with and why? That's a pretty easy one for me. I identify a lot with Marty because we both love to spend time outside. Ms. Buchholz's class asks, how do you know how long to make a book? That's a great question. Usually before I start writing a book, I do a pretty rough outline, and so I have an idea of how long it's going to be, but I never quite know exactly until I finish. Mrs. Leroy's second grade class from Lone Tree Elementary in Lone Tree, Colorado says, why did you use a cafeteria trash can with smashed peas instead of a clean trash can in the book? Well, because a clean trash can would have made things easier and not as interesting, and also would have left me with fewer sensory details to write about, and I love those things, so thus the smashed peas. Mrs. Petney's grade 3 class from St. Elizabeth Ann Seton School in Barhaven, Ontario says, we loved your book. We noticed in the book how lonely, sad, frustrated, and disappointed Marty seemed when her best friend Annie became such good friends with Veronica Grace. So we're wondering if you ever had that kind of experience with a good friend when you were growing up, and if you did, how did you handle it? Well, I didn't have an experience exactly like Marty's, but I think as we grow up, everybody runs into some sort of experience where somebody you were friends with, is a little bit different, or maybe they make a new friend and they spend less time with you, and adapting to that and understanding that it's still okay. You can still be friends and have other friends too is part of growing up. Mrs. Adams' third grade says, we were wondering how and when you found out that your book was selected for the Global Read Aloud. Well, I'm pretty sure I found out on Twitter. That's a social media place where a lot of teachers go to talk about books and things, and I think somebody told me there. I was very excited. Mrs. Spalding has a homeschool group in Lincoln, Nebraska, and Liberty, a second grader, says, why wasn't James in the end of the book? Well, he wasn't an actual person who was in the school every day. He was sort of a special guest who was brought in a few times to help out when the kids were getting ready for the play, but I'm sure he was there to see in the audience. Mrs. McDaniel's second grade class at Northeast Elementary School in Ithaca, New York says, we wondered If Marty and Annie stopped playing together, were they really still friends or not? Some students in our class thought yes, and others thought differently. They thought if they didn't play together on the playground or after school that they stopped being friends. What were you thinking about their friendship while you were writing the book? What an interesting question. I was actually thinking that probably Marty and Annie saw the situation very differently. I don't think Annie ever thought that she wasn't Marty's friend. I just thought she maybe wanted some other friends too, but Marty took that kind of personally. And so sometimes how we see things really affects our perspective. Miss Kozel's class asks, are the characters' names based on people you know? Some of them yes, some of them no. Here are some of the ones that are. Mrs. Alloy is a character who's named after my sister-in-law, who's also a teacher. Annie, that name belonged to one of my former neighbors who I liked a lot. Rupert is the name of a boy who played drums in my marching band. I get names from all over the place. That was when I was growing up. Jimmy Lawson was the name of one of my big sister's boyfriends when I was a little girl. And McGuire, Marty's last name, is actually a family name. That was my grandmother's name before she was married. So some of those names I just make up and some do come from real places. Mrs. McDonough and Ms. Nakagawa's grade 2-3 readers at Cougar Creek Elementary in Surrey, British Columbia ask, we'd like to know, how does writing a book or story make you feel? Well, that's kind of a big question because I feel a lot of different things when I'm working on a book. Sometimes if I'm in the middle of a project and I get stuck, I feel frustrated, just like maybe you do when you get stuck with your writing. When I finish a project and I work really hard on revising it to make it better, and then I know it's better than it was before, I get really excited and proud. And so you probably feel that way too. So I think it's probably very similar to the way you guys feel as writers. Ms. Dumas' third grade class at Garner Elementary in Clio, Michigan says, we were talking about author's purpose today, and we wrote in our writer's notebooks what we thought your purpose was for writing Marty McGuire. We had many different ideas, but could you comment on why exactly you wanted to write Marty McGuire? What do you hope the reader gets from your book? A good story. That's really all. Usually when authors are writing a book, the big thing they want readers to get from it is to be taken away to another place and meet some characters they've never met and have a great adventure. And so that's what I hoped you would have when you read Marty. The grade 3 students in Miss Wood's class in Oakville, Ontario, Canada ask, what is your favorite food? Chocolate. Specifically, milk chocolate sea salt caramels. But you can't really live on that, so I also like a lot of vegetables and fruits and seafood and things like that. Miss Alicia's Year 1 and 2 class from Semarang International School in Indonesia say, we were upset with Marty's mom for making Marty be the princess instead of letting her make her own decision. So we were wondering, has anyone ever forced you to do something you didn't want to do? I don't know if I've ever been really, truly forced to do something I didn't want to do. Other than cleaning my room. When I was a kid, I never wanted to do that. But I've always been encouraged to try new things. And sometimes I kind of push myself in that direction because I think that's how we grow. Mr. Himes, grade 2 students at St. Patrick's Episcopal Day School in Washington, D.C., are wondering why I made Marty have short hair. Well, I don't know if I actually described exactly how long her hair was. I think that was more of a decision that the illustrator, Brian Floca, made. I didn't say her hair was really short or really long, and usually anything that's not covered in the text by the author is something that the illustrator gets to imagine. So that's really one of the fun parts of writing a book with illustrations. Madame Amoa's second grade class from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, would like to know if I write nonfiction books. Well, I do. I actually have my very first work of nonfiction coming out in the fall of 2014. It's going to be called Tree of Life, and it is about all the animals that depend on this one particular kind of tree called the almendro tree in the Costa Rica rainforest. So it's an animal book and a nature book, and there are frogs and spiders and snakes and really cool ants. And it also is a math book in kind of a funny way. So you can look for that one in the fall, about a year from now. Melissa Tart's grade 3 class at Roseville School in Windsor, Ontario says, do you read your own Marty McGuire books and do you read them to groups of students? Sometimes I do. A lot of times I'll do a short reading from a Marty McGuire book when I visit a school to do a writing workshop with kids, and that's a lot of fun for me. And Ms. Tart's class also says we are going to persuade our librarian to buy Marty McGuire Digs Worms for our library. Well, thank you. And I think that's a great note to end on. If you guys enjoyed Marty McGuire for the Global Read Aloud, I do hope you will ask your librarian if you can borrow Marty McGuire Digs Worms. And then the third book in the series, Marty McGuire Has Too Many Pets, you can see a picture of it down there, comes out in January. Again, thank you so much for participating in the Global Read Aloud and sharing Marty McGuire with one another and sharing your questions with me. Keep reading and have a great rest of the school year.